Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us as Affinity Community Services presents the third installment of the Blackprint, our plan to develop the capacity of Black LGBTQ plus leaders. My name is Imani Rupert-Gordon, and I will be your moderator today. I'm the Executive Director for Affinity Community Services. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, or they, them, and theirs. And Affinity is a social justice organization that works with all LGBTQ communities with a special emphasis on Black LGBTQ women. I'm really excited about our panel today. We are with three incredibly amazing women who are also elected officials. Our first panelist is Representative Park Cannon from the Georgia House of Reps. And our second panelist is Minneapolis Council Vice President Andrea Jenkins, who's also the first Black openly transgender person to be elected to public office in the United States. And our final panelist is Representative Renita Shannon of the Georgia House of Reps. This is going to be an absolutely fabulous conversation. But before we get started, I just want to give you a quick overview of the platform we're using to make sure you're having the best experience you can. So because we have such a large group, you'll notice that you are already on mute. But this doesn't mean that you can't interact with anyone. If you look to the left of your screen, you'll see a box that has a chat and questions and answers. You can navigate between the two. Remember, chat is for you to interact with other people participating in this webinar today. And the questions and answers, those go straight to us. And we ask these questions at the end of our broadcast. We'll have a chance for questions and answers. You can start writing questions. You can start writing questions at any time right now. Know that some of them are the way you can share on social media or to navigate between the chat box and some other things as well. Go ahead and hover, find out what each of them do, and you can try them out. And if you want your screen to go back to its original setup, you just click the blue icon on the left, and that will reset everything. You can also make your screens bigger or smaller by clicking the corner and then dragging them to make it bigger or smaller. Again, if you want to reset that to the original setting, you just click the blue reset button. So periodically, you'll see that we're also going to ask the audience a polling question. This is going to be to the left of your screen, and it can bounce around a little bit too. And the purpose of this is to let us know how you're experiencing the broadcast, and that can impact the way that we support you in it. So let's start off by asking a polling question, just so you can try that out. Okay, so I'm sure the polling question is going to come up anytime now. But while we're doing that, why don't we start our conversation today? So the topic of today's conversation is building political power. And we know that Black people, people of color, LGBTQ folks are all underrepresented, especially when holding positions as elected officials. So it's both a miracle and an honor that we are sitting here with the three Black LGBTQ plus women that are elected officials. So if you could start off by telling us your pronouns, what the office you hold, and how long you've been in that position. Representative Shannon, let's start with you.
Hi, everybody. My name is State Representative Renita Shannon. I represent Georgia House District 84, which is DeKalb County. We're about 6 miles from the Capitol. And I actually just finished my first term. So I was elected in 2016, sworn in 2017, and just finished my first term. My pronouns are her, her, and hers. She, her, and hers.
Okay. Thank you. Council VP Jenkins, if you could answer the same question. What are your pronouns? What is the office you hold? And how long have you been in your current position?
So good afternoon, everybody. What an honor it is to be on this call with you guys today. This is quite an amazing conversation. So my name is Andrea Jenkins. I am the Vice President of the Minneapolis City Council. I was elected in November 2017, so just 7 months into my first term. It's a 4-year office, 4-year term, so we got a little time to get some good work accomplished. My pronouns are she, her, and hers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And same question to you, Representative Cannon. What are your pronouns? What is the office that you hold, and how long have you been in that position?
Hi there, everyone. It's such an honor to see you today. My name is Park Cannon. I am currently 27 years old. I was elected at age 23 back in 2016. This is the start of my third term of 2 years each in the State House of Representatives in Georgia alongside Representative Renita Shannon. And I love to be called she and her.
Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate that. So I'd like to start off. I'm wondering how did you come out as an LGBTQ person, and specifically in regards to the position you hold? So not maybe the first time you came out ever, but the first time you came out, in your position. So was it before or after you were elected? And then what do you think the impact was of your coming out? And let's start with you, Representative Cannon.
Well, certainly I recognize what I was feeling on the inside when I decided to run for office, which was that I had an opportunity to continue the legacy of Black queer leadership in Georgia's government. The representative who was currently in the seat, Simone Bell, she was the first Black lesbian to serve in any House of Representatives. And so she spoke with me at length about my queer identity and whether or not I wanted to come out publicly when I decided to run. Many people even said to me, if you date people who are female identified and there was a lesbian in the seat already, just run as a lesbian. Don't run as an openly queer person. And it took my community of LGBTQ plus folks to say, no, we really need representation and we will support you. We'll stand with you. We believe that there is power in your out queer story. And so just a few months after we were successful with my race, there was another race out in Colorado for one of our new colleagues in the State House out there, Leslie Herod. And then there were 2 other people who ran in 2017 openly queer. So now we have 5 openly queer folks across the United States.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. CBP Jenkins, when did you come out and what was the impact? CBP Jenkins, can you hear us? Let's come back. Let's come back to her. Let's go next to you. Oh, okay, great.
This
Yes,
is
we
Andrea.
can hear you now.
All right, sorry. I hope that Representative Cannon included me in that out queer number because I've been doing this work in my community as an activist, as a political operative, if you will, as openly trans, openly queer, openly bi for many, many years. And so when I ran for office, it really wasn't an issue. There was no really need to come out per se, but as I was campaigning, I was always talking about the communities that I represent very, very broadly. And, I had queer identified, trans identified folks working on my campaign. And, the community that I represent is probably, I would say, predominantly straight, and predominantly white. And so, I think people were excited about my candidacy from a standpoint of, I have proven myself to be a competent person, and they were equally excited that I just happened to be openly trans and queer and Black.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Same to you, Representative Shannon. When did you come out, and what is the impact do you think that had?
So I had a different experience. I did not run as being openly queer. I actually was an activist in my personal time before getting elected to the House of Representatives in Georgia. And so being an activist, I was used to centering the issue, not so much focusing on the actual individual, which would be myself. So I continued that throughout my campaign, and I'm also a very private person. So in my campaign, I mostly focused on economic justice, racial justice, and gender issues in the campaign, but I did not talk a lot about myself personally. And so last year in October of 2017, one of my other colleagues, Keisha Waits, who was an open lesbian in the House of Representatives, decided to resign her seat, and she decided to run for a position within local government in Fulton County. And she actually sat right behind me in the House. And so when she left, and we also saw the first time at the United Nations, the Trump administration decided to include LGBT folks in a UN resolution where they voted against giving people the death penalty for being queer in their country, giving folks a death penalty for things like extramarital affairs. But this is really the first time that the LGBTQ community had been involved within a United Nations resolution. And Nikki Haley had voted against giving people the death penalty for being gay. And so the combination of Keisha Waits leaving and realizing that the numbers of the openly LGBTQ folks in the House would decrease. It would go from 4, which is the most we've ever had. So it would go down to 3. And then also understanding what the Trump administration was doing and just how willing they were to support violence against the LGBTQ community. Those are the 2 things that forced me to put away my privacy and to step up and publicly identify as bisexual. This coming out was also new to a lot of folks in my family. Like I said, it was nothing that I was ever ashamed of, but I am a private person. And so it was the combination of those 2 things, understanding that I literally could not sit there and watch Keisha Waits leave the House, knowing that this identity applies to me as well. And so that's when I decided to come out. I think that the impact that it's had is that my constituents, although they've always known me to be a fierce advocate for the LGBTQ community, they now don't have to worry how long my solidarity will last or if it will ever run out, because now they know that I'm also a part of the community.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much, everyone. We are so happy that you're all openly LGBTQ. It's important for us to see representation, and I'm thrilled to just be able to spend this time with you all. And I want to shift gears for just a bit and talk about fundraising, because we know that this is something, a fundraising component is actually a considerable component, and a reason that some people choose not to run at all. And I'm wondering, have you found it particularly difficult to fundraise as a Black, openly LGBTQ woman? And I'm wondering if there's anything in particular around that. CVP Jenkins, let's start with you.
Thank you. And I think you're absolutely right. Fundraising is an incredibly important part for people seeking public office. And I think it's, it can be scary for a lot of African American women, particularly queer identified women. And so I think it's really important to seek out skills and opportunities to practice and really take advantage of your networks. And I think being being one of the few Black trans people running for public office, I had an opportunity to tap into a broader national network which really was important for me, even though I would say the majority of my contributions came from my community. But it's really important to figure out exactly what you need, set some goals, write those goals down, because I personally believe that when we write down our goals, it actually ignites something magical in the universe that helps to bring those things to fruition. And so, and you just have to be confident. You know, it's really a challenge for a lot of people to ask for financial support. And when people are willing to do it, they know, but you have to make the ask. So, you know, it was a challenge, but we actually exceeded our initial goal and met our, so we called it the Prius goal, just enough to get us to the, you know, to our win number. And then we had our Cadillac goal, which would allow us to then have some resources once we were elected. And we actually exceeded both of those goals. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Representative Shannon, same question to you. In regards to fundraising, do you think it is particularly difficult as a Black bisexual woman?
Absolutely. So I also was in a different position than I assume the other two folks who were on the phone. As I mentioned before, I came from community organizing in my personal capacity, but for my professional career, I was working in business. So I made a living off of knowing how to generate revenue. So I wasn't afraid to ask for money. And the fundraising, the actual asking for money did come easier as far as the effort that I put in. But what was different was I was running against an incumbent. So the guy that I was running against was a right-leaning, he was a conservative Democrat. A lot of people knew him. He was locally famous. His dad was Grady on Sanford and Son. So people were really enjoying that Grady's son was representing the district, and that made it very difficult. So I basically ran as a strong progressive against a conservative Democrat. And so it was very difficult because people think of campaigns and candidates as investments, and they want to put their money with who they think will win. And so the statistics say that 95% of people who challenge an incumbent will lose that race. And so it was very, very difficult to raise money locally. I would get a lot of folks saying, well, I think you're great, and I prefer you to him, but the statistics say you probably will not win this race. So that was very difficult. I ended up having to do what CVP Jenkins just mentioned, which is I had to call for money outside of Georgia, and I had to call for money that was further away from the district, because with that, folks were less hesitant. There was less risk for them if I did not win my race as far as retribution from the incumbent. So that was one of the ways I overcame that. But I do think in general that it is tougher for Black women specifically to raise money, queer candidates as well, because you, like I said, folks see it as an investment. And, you know, so sometimes, so you have to work twice as hard to raise the same amount of money that folks will openly donate to other candidates they're used to seeing in positions of power, like white men. So there's a lot of constantly proving your viability, where I think a lot of donors don't really question the viability and success of white men who predominantly fill our government. So there's a lot of proving your viability, and oftentimes your checks are half as much. This also transfers over into after you're elected, staying elected, you still have the same issue, I find, where your checks are still not the same as some of your counterparts who are literally in the same position as you, because once again, people see it as an investment. And it looks much like what we experience on a national level with pay equity issues for women. So it's very similar. So so the short story is you have to be very, very aggressive about fundraising. You have to be relentless about getting people to support you. And if they don't want to support you, you have to move right past them. Don't waste time with those folks.
Gotcha. Thanks so much for saying that and for that great distinction about pay equity. I think that's really important. Representative Cannon, I wonder about the same question for you. How has fundraising for you been as a Black queer woman? And you also were quite young when you first got elected as well. And maybe you want to speak to that.
Oh, certainly. You know, when I decided to run for office, one of the first things that I did was called up some of my friends and said, I think I'm going to do this crazy thing. Would you support me? And all of them would say, yes, we're so excited, as long as you don't ask us for money, because we don't have any. I was just a year out of college. I was in my first job, and many of my friends had either descended back into academia for master's degrees and certainly were living on stipends, and others were in their first jobs or back at home with their families and actually being a part of an economic circumstance where they didn't have discretionary funds to give to politics. So it was as if my network was not just small, but it was concerned about if that was the good use of the community's funds. So I had to really start to reimagine how these donors who would be coming in at low levels could still be beneficial. And so even to this day, I have a concern with political action committees. I think that there are conglomerates of money for politics that feed into races, that make the stakes harder for people of color and queer folks and young folks to be a part of it. If someone has donated to this specific political action committee in the past, and now they're telling that political action committee where they want that money to go, that's where they send it. But I had to learn that there are positive political action committees based on the beliefs of our communities. So there are organizations that support people's right to choose their own medical circumstances. There are organizations that specifically make sure that our queer communities are represented in policy. And there are definitely political action committees that come out of organized and union labor. So now I have learned, after being on the ballot 5 times, in January of 2016, again in February of 2016, then in May of 2016, in November of 2016, and then just 2 months ago in May of 2018, people do unfortunately give less to people of color when they run for office. They might donate $100 to someone else and then donate $50 to us. So asking for money for our campaign budget was actually practice for asking for money in the state budget. And that's our job. So I am happy to help anyone who is looking to look at taking away the difficulties and fundraising as a Black LGBTQ person running for office.
Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. Thank you so much, Representative Cannon. I really appreciate that. So also want to move on. So something that's pretty amazing is that we are sitting here with 3 Black LGBTQ women who all won their elections. And so we want to find out, what did you do? Is there anything that's happened, maybe even something that came through that you didn't expect, that maybe helped make this happen? What did it take for you to win, I guess is what we're getting at. So Representative Cannon, Representative Shannon, I'm sorry. Can we start with you?
Sure. So like I said before, my race was very unusual because I was a progressive, running against a conservative Democrat. So at the end of the day, voters just saw that as two Democrats, and they didn't really understand why I was challenging this person. And so it was definitely an uphill battle. When you run against somebody within your own party, every single vote that you have to steal every single vote that you get. And so that made the race very difficult. Some of the things that I learned was, number one, you have to be unequivocal with voters about what you stand for. And that was easy for me because coming from an activist background, I knew exactly which issues I cared about. I did not equivocate with the voters on what policies I stood for. So I openly stood on the fact that we need a $15 minimum wage and we need a living wage in general. So we shouldn't just be stuck at $15. I talked about pay equity for women. I talked about healthcare and education. And so just being direct with voters and running on issues that they care about was definitely something that really impacted my campaign, because I think we see far too much the elected officials that we have currently in our government are very squishy on what they stand for voters. So just being direct and talking about issues that actually impact people's lives, that's how you give people something to come out and vote for. The other thing was, absolutely, I ran a very grassroots campaign. I started early. I campaigned for a year and a half. I canvassed my district so much that by election day, voters were driving by saying, "Miss Shannon, I just voted for you. Please stop filling up my mailbox. Please stop knocking on my door. Stop calling me. I voted for you. Stop harassing me." So that really, just running that grassroots campaign, at the end of the day, it lets voters know that you care about them and you are anxious to serve them. And it really reinforces why you're running for office. And so lastly, I would say building a great coalition of folks to support you, meaning I had a lot of support from the unions, reproductive rights and justice groups, and also lots of local community plugging in and making them really feel the campaign. And so with all of that, like I said, it was very, very difficult. Anytime you try to unseat an incumbent who had been in office as long as my competitor had been in office, which was about 8 years. And like I said, he was locally famous. All of that together was very difficult to beat. But running campaigns is a science, and there is a way that you can get into the 5% if you choose to run against an incumbent. And we're seeing that more and more. We saw, a couple weeks ago with Alexandria Ocasio in New York. And so it absolutely can be done, but you really have to run a heavy grassroots a heavy campaign that is built on really reaching to voters.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Representative Shannon. Really appreciate that. You'll see on the side there is a polling question. We're asking if you've ever considered running for political office. Go ahead and write in. We're really interested to see if this is something you're interested in. And moving right along, Representative Cannon, same question. Is there anything that came through unexpectedly, or what did it take for you to win your election?
Well, the most unexpected part of the entire race in the beginning was that we didn't even know how many races we were going to need to have in order to attain the seat. There had been an incumbent. She had been there for 6 years, and she decided to resign. So all of a sudden, this is an open seat. So anyone could decide that they wanted to run for office. And so the person who had represented some of the district before, because our districts were drawn together because of the conservative nature of our state government, they tried to take away as many possible districts from what could possibly lean Democrat. So not only did I have a previous state representative running, but I also had an attorney running. And so for me to explain to people why this was such an important vote for them to make to move our community forward, I needed a good amount of support from upstanding individuals or people that are trusted politically. So some of these were like labor unions. They would get out and knock doors for me in the cold. My first elections were we declared in November of 2016, and the election was in January. So these were all of the holidays. We had to have unions out there knocking doors, and that made such a big difference for me. The other thing that I will say is what I learned about what it really takes for us to win. It is certainly focus. We spent every penny we had. We spent every moment we could. We went to every event possible, and we kept good to our promises. I thought that I would just be able to maybe have one election and I would be good for a year. And like I've explained, that year I ended up having 4 elections. And it was during the presidential elections time. So there was a lot of rhetoric out there about the lack of joining with political forces. People were intentionally feeling as though the government was becoming more corrupt or more narcissistic. And let me be very clear, I believe that our government is very narcissistic leadership right now, and we need to remove ourselves as much as we can from being implicated. But I am very proud to represent District 58. It's where Dr. King's birth home is. It's where the Capitol building is. It's a bunch of our clinics. It's a beautiful Piedmont Park. And I look forward to continuing to be a part of this, Black leadership that we have. This is our Blackprint, and we've got to make it clear that we're not going anywhere.
Thank you so much for I'm not sure if you heard that, but thank you so much, Representative Cannon. Really appreciate your response. CVP Jenkins, same question. Is there anything that maybe you weren't expecting that came through for you? Or basically, how did you win your election?
Yeah, much like Representative Cannon mentioned, I got early support from a lot of political organizations. My first endorsement was from a group called Women Winning, and those endorsements do come with dollars too, many times, and so those do help with the fundraising aspects, and it sort of opens the door for other people to then contribute to your campaigns as well. But I was surprised. I think we got over 20 some odd endorsements. 20 plus endorsements. The biggest surprise for me, though, in the campaign, and it goes antithetical to everything they sort of teach you in campaign school, is that we won our race by 73%. I was floored by that, but we also increased voter turnout by 11%, and that it was a pretty low turnout ward that I live in, and so to have an 11% increase in voter turnout is super huge, and it came as a big surprise to me, but it just says that our communities will vote when they hear the right message, when they hear that people are concerned about the issues that they are concerned about and are willing to stand up and fight for them. People will show up at the polls. And, in 2018, this is a midterm election. It is so critical and imperative that we all drag our neighbors, our mamas, our brothers, our cousins, Junebug and them, everybody, to the polls to make sure that we are making our voices heard. This is one of the most critical elections of our lifetime.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate just the responses of all of our panelists. Thank you so much. That concludes the facilitated Q&A. And so now we're going to get to your questions and answers. So if you have a question, write in. If you want to ask a specific person, just let us know and add that in. So we have some questions coming in, and definitely keep those coming. But first, so we want to talk about, and some of you have talked about this a little bit, but how did you activate women, Black people, communities of color, and LGBTQ people specifically to participate in your elections? If so, how? And if not, why not? And let's start with Representative Shannon.
So most of it was literally by canvassing. A lot of people just underestimate how powerful that is. You know, people can change their phone number, and a lot of the voter databases don't have correct contact information, whether it be email or phone numbers. But people, for the most part, tend to sort of want to live in the same places that they've already lived. So, I mean, when I say that, just to make it clear, that just means that usually folks don't move just for fun. So a lot of the information in the voter databases as to where the voters live was current, and it was great. And so just through knocking on doors and going face to face, I hear a lot of elected officials now and folks campaigning saying, you know, well, I wish voters would plug in more, and I wish voters would pay more attention. And that's true, they should. But at the same time, if you're running a campaign, you're asking voters to give you the job. So you have to proactively reach out to them. And I think the best way to do that is by door knocking. So I absolutely engaged all of the groups that you're talking about because I was campaigning and standing up for their issues. And so I knew that those folks would elect me, and that is what happened. My district was majority Black. The incumbent that I was running against was also, he was a Black male. So, you know, it was a fight for the Black vote. And I knew the only way that I could get that was to activate not only the LGBTQ community, women, Black folks in general. You had to activate all of those groups in order to win the election. And so that's really what it was knocking on their doors and letting them know, I am so interested in you. That is why I am showing up at your door and numerous times to hear what you have to say.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Representative Cannon, same question. How did you activate Black people, communities of color, LGBT people, specifically to participate in your elections? If so, how did you do it? And if not, why not?
Well, when we decided about our campaign strategy, we knew that we would have a voting bloc within the city of Atlanta that was highly African American, but that was not turning out the vote. As you know, Councilwoman spoke about just a little while ago, when you're excited about getting to your win number to make sure that you're able to pull out enough votes to win your election, you're also thinking about how it feeds into other races and how it helps for you to get a progressive group of people elected to office. At the time that I was running, my name was the only one on the ballot that was coming in this way, and we were the only race in this state. So our turnout, which could have been up to 25,000 people, the first election was only like 2,800 people. So we knew that when we had the runoff in February, we not only needed to increase our numbers because we had already gotten the percentage that we felt comfortable with. It happened to be 49.7%, which when you have a voting system like we do, in order to win a race, you need 50.1. That turned out to only be 23 votes difference. So we knew that we could get at least 23 more votes in the next election, but we wanted to show that people were engaged and were turning out and voting. And so in order to do that, we hosted a number of events that finally brought some of the social and political worlds together. If you've, never attended a fundraiser where there is lesbian comedy, I don't know what you're doing. That's what we started doing. We started bringing our community together and having a really fun time. So people would come to the fundraiser and say, I don't have that much to give financially, but I would love to host you in my home and invite 5 of my friends, and we can talk about the issues that we care about. And in that way, we got more volunteers who were queer identified and who were willing and able to go knock on doors as who we are and to say this is who we want to elect.
Thank you so much, Representative Cannon. Really appreciate it. CVP Jenkins, same question. Did you activate women, Black folks, people of color, specifically to participate in your elections? If so, how did you do it? And if not, why not?
Yeah, no, thanks for that amazing question. I love talking about this because my campaign team was 98% women, queer women, lesbian identified women, trans women, uh, younger. When my campaign manager was a 19-year-old Pakistani college student, and she's amazing, by the way. And so, we engaged women in the campaign, which in turn just really motivated women, voters and supporters to really get engaged with our campaign. We hosted queer events. There's a large gay sort of event group in our city called Flip Phone, and they hosted an event for me, and we had live entertainment. The venue that we had it in donated the space to the campaign. And so, I think you have to think about creative ways to get communities that haven't really been engaged in the electoral process, and really recognize the importance of electoral politics, to come out and get engaged and really see and understand that it is not some mystery, it's not some sort of secret society that you have to be a part of. It's just regular everyday people who are concerned about their communities. And I come from an activist, community building, community organizing background as well, and I know that all of those people are concerned about some really critical issues, but trying to get the message across that we have to be multi-strategy. Protesting and marching in the streets are certainly a big part of that effort. Providing services to people are a really big part of that effort. But creating good policies that support and protect communities also has to be a big part of that effort. So, we got people engaged by modeling the kind of culture that we want to see. And I will add that even now, I have 2 staff people that work in my office, since I've been elected, and it's a Black Muslim identified woman and a Latina woman. So, we're carrying this thing forward too, not just during the campaign, but we're actually trying to live the values that we speak about.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And you'll see that there's a polling question asking, do you think there's value in electing Black LGBTQ plus women leaders? Answers are yes, representation matters. No, identity shouldn't matter. Or I've never thought about it. We really like you to answer that and figure out where you are. But another question that has come up, people are wondering, how has churches played a role in your getting elected, if at all? Let's start with you, Representative Shannon.
So I would say that churches played a very little role in my election, almost none. And the reason why is because, so my dad was a pastor growing up, and the way that churches operate have really changed. When it used to be that people walked to their local church, and so the church that was in your community, people would, they lived around the church. Now with the different types of churches we have today, where people just kind of go based on what they like that happens in the service, you'll find people, for example, who drive 30 minutes away from where they live to go to a specific church. So a lot of times churches, you're still not getting people who actually live in that community, which for the office I was running for, you're running within that House district and you have to get folks who live in that district to vote for you. So I did not really target churches. Again, like I said, my campaign was very, very strategic. I was talking to the people that I knew would show up to vote. And so for me, that meant going to where they live, because I was pretty much guaranteed that that would be the best place to find them. So I did not do a lot of forums. I didn't do any of standing on the corner holding signs. I mean, my campaign was extremely strategic in that I literally just went to their houses, because I know that that was the best place to find them over everywhere else.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that. Representative Cannon, same question. Did churches play a role in you winning your election?
Well, I am very excited to be a part of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s church community, his beloved community. The historic Ebenezer Baptist Church is not only located in my district, it is directly across the street from one of the most well-known polling places within our county, and it's also a major tourist attraction for our state. This is our state-funded park. This is a state-funded museum. And so there is always a high number of people who, either because they, like Representative Shannon said, they drive 30 minutes to come to the church, or whether they just happen to be visiting on that weekend and decided Sunday morning was the time that they had to do it. There's always a lot of people around that church. But that did not translate to direct voters. And it was so hard for me to accept that, because I wanted to challenge it and say, really? Y'all don't live around here? Really? You can't vote anywhere near here? And it got to this point where, like I said, I'm a third generation member there. So I have, been going there and sit in the same spot, and my family sits in the same spot. And we're used to people coming in and out as visitors, but not generally political visitors. But since they knew this was my church or the church that I'm a part of, and possibly a community of influence that they wanted to be a part of as well, my opposition came to my church. And they wrote in the visitor book that they were a visitor, representing the committee to elect, and then their name. And so they were announced over the entire church. And I'm sitting there with my mom, like, what? How is it possible that even some of my church members don't know that I'm running? And now they're open to this other person who is running. And so in that moment, I definitely had to take a deep breath and pray, but it felt very emotional. I think the issues that come when you bring religion into politics brings a lot of emotion in. And if possible, as people are running, I certainly recommend leaving that out, because there should be a separation between church and state. And in the South, that seems to be blurred more than not.
Thank you so much for that, Representative Cannon. Appreciate it. CVP Jenkins, same question. Has churches played a role in your getting elected?
I would have to say a minimal role. I didn't spend a lot of time, or our strategy did not include a pulpit sort of strategy. Where I would say it played a role, my mom happens to live in my district, and her church is in my district. And so, she would talk about my campaign to her church friends. She hosted a fundraiser for me and invited a lot of her friends, and they came and they contributed and asked me questions about, what are some of the things that I wanted to see for the community. And though I do think a number of the people who supported my campaign, are members of faith communities, but many times, like has already been expressed, people go to church all over. And so, there's a couple of historically Black churches in my community, but they attract people from all throughout the metro area, and not necessarily people from the neighborhood. And then the people from the neighborhood end up going to various churches outside of the neighborhood. So, much like Representative Shannon, we really focused our efforts on getting on the doors, getting on the phones, showing up at various events. I think I did go to a couple of church picnics, but not necessarily a Sunday morning strategy to try to connect with folks like that.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for your questions. The final question I'm going to ask you all, could you leave us with 3 things that you'd like us to remember from this experience? If you could say those, keep it to a minute. And if you could share also one book that you've read that's changed the way you think. And let's start with you, Representative Cannon.
Well, sure. I mean, thank you so much for the time that you have invested in getting this all together, and thank you all for listening. The first thing is definitely that when women run, women win. There is no question to the science, the political science, and the social science that comes when you see a mother decide that she's going to run for a school board seat, when you see a young person decide that they're going to run for a state office, when you hear that someone has challenged a court to take up a seat in a historically male space, you feel more engaged with that vote. You remember their name. You become interested. And so please do look out for the women who are running and the women who are going to be winning. The second thing is that our voting strategies are not adequate. We, maybe the day before the election, will hear on the news that the election is tomorrow, so we'll start to just get on Facebook and see if we can find anyone's pages, or we'll just wait till the morning when we get there and see whose yard sign is outside before we timidly go inside. That is not how it should be. Voting is something we should be proud of, and we should take enough effort and care to do well. It is our duty and our responsibility to elect people that we believe have our best interests at heart and at mind, and so we need to be early voting. There is no question in my mind that in the state of Georgia, if someone is listening right now and they have not voted, that they should not be going and voting tomorrow. Tomorrow is Saturday voting. We do not historically even have great voting laws in Georgia. So people need to get out and to get ready to vote. And then the third thing, of course, that I hope that people take away from this webinar with the 3 of us is that we are still low in number. We still need people who are willing to identify within our community and run to represent the issues. Now, don't get it twisted. This is not just saying your identity and expecting that folks are going to come and vote for you. It is hard work. It takes a lot of patience with yourself and with others, and it actually does make you feel as though you are vulnerable. But as I, have read before, there's, of course, a book about basically the hidden life of Rosa Parks and how what happened before she stood up on that bus, which is ultimately that we are supported more than we think we are.
Well, thank you so much, Representative Cannon. CVP Jenkins, same question. If you could just take a minute to do this. Leave us with 3 things that you'd like us to remember, and then also share with us a book that's changed the way that you think.
Boy, I could just say ditto what she said, but I will try to add to that, even though I cannot emphasize enough, when we run, we win. And I just want to say something about that. I think that I just read a statistic not too long ago. I have a chapter in a book that's coming out about women running for office. It's coming out this fall, called Run. There are about 1,192 women elected to public office in the United States, and about 3% of those women are women of color. And so we have to step up and be a part of our communities in that way. And I know that we have so many challenges, working 3 jobs, trying to raise 2 kids, taking care of our mamas, taking care of our communities. But it is really, so if you can't run for office, then you gotta support the sisters who are running for office. It's really, really critical that we support, and I understand that resources are short, but you can always go make phone calls. You can always go knock on doors. You can have a bake sale. We gotta be able to support these sisters running for office. Secondly, I would say, understand the issues. If you are thinking about running for office, being a Black lesbian is not going to get you elected. You have to understand the issues that are important to your community. And sometimes the issues that you may care about may not be the same issues that people are activating around. So you have to understand your environment. You got to understand your particular race and what is going to win. There may be a time, like if you live in, Midtown Atlanta, being an out queer woman is an asset. But, if you are in, Akron, Ohio, maybe not. And so you have to really understand your race and your community and the issues that people are concerned about. And then the third thing that I would just reiterate what Representative Cannon stated is that it is a challenging role. So you really have to have self-care at the top of mind. Have some space to step outside of that arena and really try to build a well of support from family, from chosen family, from friends, from networks, from pets, if that's your thing. But you really have to create sort of a cone of support. The most impactful book that I have read recently is The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. It just really, it's an amazing book. It's so well written, and it really talks about the migration from the south to the north and the inherent challenges that Black folks face once they sort of migrated to the north as refugees, quote, which is what she identified people as. But I would only add that there's an addendum to that book, and that would be the article by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I know he has some challenges and some problematic positions as well, but A Case for Reparations coupled with The Warmth of Other Suns, and you will be well armed to stand up and fight for your community.
Thank you so much, CVP Jenkins.
And I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you guys. This is so powerful, so amazing. I'm glad this opportunity worked out, and thank you guys for putting this incredible dialogue and conversation together. And what's up, Shannon?
Hey, Andrea. It's good to hear from you again.
It's good to hear from you too, Renita. Great to see you.
Yeah, you too. So I guess that leaves me. I would say the 3 things that I would want to leave with everybody is, number 1, reach out to others who've done what it is that you're trying to do. So if you were trying to unseat an incumbent, reach out to folks like myself who've already been down that road, and they can identify with what you will have to do specifically to get there. I will release my contact information right now. I'm at Renita Shannon. That's RENITTA SHANNON on every platform. I co-founded an organization called Her Term that specifically works to help elect progressive women in competitive seats in Georgia. And so right now we're working with about 15 women. And so that's my piece of advice, is talk to others who have been where you were trying to go, and hopefully they will help you. I certainly am willing to help anybody. I've worked with candidates around the country to help progressive folks get elected. So that'd be my first piece of advice. The second piece of advice, which I think is just great life advice in general, is walk very quickly past anybody who doesn't want to support you. Ask for the support you need, and if they don't want to support you, move on, because you don't have time to waste, negotiating with people who know that they will never support you. So walk quickly past those folks and find the people who will support you, because there is support out there for you. But if you get discouraged, you're never going to find the folks who actually do want to support you. And then lastly, I would say, don't underestimate your value. One of the reasons that I never run from identity politics is because I know there's so much power in folks who live at the intersection of so many identities, which is queer Black women. We sit at the intersection of every single one of the most marginalized identities in our society. And the reason why I say that that is important is because when you sit at the center of so many identities, that experience, that life experience, teaches you where are all the areas that folks with your identity can fall through the cracks. So the way that translates in for voters is that the best ways to protect everyone, within community, because you sit at the center of so many identities. And I think the best example of this is, think about how many times we've heard somebody speak about an issue where, let's say, for example, you hear a white male talk about economic justice, and then you sit there and you think to yourself, there are things that are missing, and it's not missing intentionally, but it's missing because when a person only sits at, one identity, when a person only reflects one identity, they can only go from their life experience. So being a queer Black woman running for office, we sit at the most marginalized identities, and as a result, we know what it takes to protect everybody. And there is power in that. I think it's really true that when you put up policies that support the most marginalized in society, everybody wins. And so that's what should allow other folks who don't sit at those identities to also benefit from your policies. And we all know that as Black folks, that many of the things that we have pointed as being problematic that affects Black folks in the country disproportionately, when those things are fixed, it's better for everybody, like education, like adequate voting rights and voting protections and economic justice issues. So there is power in that, and I wouldn't run from it. The book that I would say that really changed my life is Learned Optimism by Martin Selig. And the reason why I think that this book was so important in my life is because being raised both Black and woman in this country, you are taught to mostly just make safe decisions to keep yourself safe because of your identities. And that is something, while it's great that it keeps you safe, it also translates into folks not taking all of the risks that they really should take, like running for office, because they, have been groomed to sort of just make safe decisions. And so this book, Learned Optimism by Martin Selig, really helped me to walk past, to make more courageous decisions and take more risk, calculated and appropriate risk, so that you can have a more enriching life. And I do think that this book contributed to me running for office and doing many of the things that I've done and the success that I've had in my life. So.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all of our panelists, Representative Cannon, Representative Shannon, and CVP Andrea Jenkins. Thank you for your wisdom and your honesty. And thank you so much to our participants for your amazing questions, as always. Please join us next week, Thursday, from 12 to 1 Central Standard Time. We will be hosting Kate Kendall, Executive Director of the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and Mary Morton, President of Morton Group. We couldn't be more excited to have them. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all next week. Take care.